it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Zed, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Zed.
Makes me act the way I do.
Hi, welcome to Channel Zed and a special Q&A with Dr. Zed. And we're going to have a special guest today, Emily Zarka. I'm super excited for this. We're going to talk about medical go bags, right?
That's right. I'm super excited to be here again. So as you know, audience, I am Dr. Zed, aka Joe Alcock, and I have some background in evolutionary medicine as well as practicing emergency medicine, and I served as the co-director of the Wilderness, Austere, and Remote Medicine program here at the University of New Mexico. Right now, we are broadcasting from Dr. Zed headquarters in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. We've got a massive wilderness area right behind this headquarters, into which we could escape at a moment's notice if we had to. So the question is, what are we going to bring with us? And to help us answer that question, we are also very happy to bring on to the program Dr. Emily Zarka. She is an expert in all things monstrous and zombie related. So let's hear what you have to say, Emily.
Hi, as Dr. Zed said, I am Emily Zarka, PhD in literature. I'm a monster expert, a professor at Arizona State University, and also the host and writer of Monstrum for PBS Digital Studios. But I'm really here today because, more importantly, I grew up as a Girl Scout. I've always lived by always be prepared. So I have had a go bag in the back of my car since I would say at least 2009. So I know that this go bags or this bug out bag, right? This idea that you have a kit that you keep on you or close to you at all times that you'd be able to, access and could get you to safety or at least allow you to survive for a couple nights out on your own. So I always joke that people used to make fun of me for my zombie apocalypse bag in the back of my car, but I'm ready to go if I have to.
Good deal. And we should remind people that please submit your questions. You can do that on Facebook. There's a way to do it on YouTube. So if you are watching Channel Zed right now on those two formats, please submit your questions about what to bring with you, what to bug out with, and what should you have in your bug out kit.
So, Emily, what do you have in your bug out bag in terms of medical supplies? You've been talking it up a lot, so I want to see what you actually got in there.
There's definitely more improvement, as has been pointed out to me already, but I kind of go by the rule of heat, water, and something to give shelter as well as protection. So in terms of water, I have a life straw that I take with me always. Other medical things, I have had these N95 masks long before COVID-19 hit.
Brilliant.
And then I actually have a first aid kit. It's kind of a little ragtag, to be quite frank. I've added and subtracted to it, so maybe that's something we should talk about, is what do you need in your go bag? Like, what are top 3 things that I should absolutely have in my first aid kit in my go bag?
Joe, what do you think? What are the top 3 things Emily should have in there? And then we can see if she's got them.
Yeah, so I'm looking around my little kit here. I would say you mentioned heat. I'll just say what I have here with regard to heat. I've got a pack of matches. I've got a lighter, which is probably even better than the matches because it works when it gets wet. What do you have for heat?
For heat, I have waterproof matches for sure. And I also have an emergency blanket. I have 2 emergency blankets, I'm pretty sure. And I also have a fire starter. I always tell people, I haven't practiced with it for a while, but for me, it wasn't the easiest thing to learn how to use. So definitely want to keep practicing. But I'm a proponent of having something light or lighter that's a little bit easier, and then something like this that's a little bit more long-term and sustainable.
Now, in terms of the medical side of heat, Dr. Zed, why is heat important as part of your go bag from a medical perspective?
Well, I mean, hypothermia is a major killer if you're out in the environment. So from that perspective, that's super important to avoid hypothermic illness. Beyond that, heat is important to heat up water. So I think that that may come into this discussion, but got to have some kind of water carrier. This is for real. And heating up water, of course, sterilizes it. In addition to a life straw, I think great minds think alike because I got the same thing, Emily. And heat can also disinfect food if you have some kind of questionable, protein or carbohydrate source that you want to heat up. Heat can also serve to decrease the bacterial count in that.
We have a question actually about water since that came up from Pam, which is, should she actually take water itself in her go bag? If so, how much and when does she need to replace it?
I'll jump in. It really depends on where you live. I know, Pamela, that you live in the desert Southwest, so in a very hot environment, especially right now. So I think this time of year would be a great idea to bring water with you. The question is how much. Water is heavy, right? And if you carry too much, that can really slow you down or make it impossible to make any kind of distance if you're on the run, for instance. But it depends, again, on how you're traveling, where you live, and those are going to be some of the things to think about. If you're lucky enough to live in a place where there's plenty of fresh water, like, say, the Pacific Northwest in the Cascades, then maybe all you need to bring is something like this, a water purifying or filtering device.
So it sounds like it's really important what your context is, your ecological context for this question. Yeah, sorry, Emily, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that as someone who lives in the dirt, I know that obviously water is incredibly important, and the life straw will be helpful if I can find water source, but I always keep in mind things like cacti to, hack into that if you need to. That's why it's important to have some kind of bladed object for sure. I also keep emergency drinking water packets in my first aid kit. There's enough probably for me for like maybe a day or two water-wise, but it's something that's relatively lightweight. It's kind of in these pre-packaged little pouches, and I can just slip that into my first aid kit and know that I have some kind of water, at least to get me through the first day before I can get somewhere else. Although I don't carry it in my go bag, I have considered buying actually a ceramic filter, because here in Arizona and in a residential neighborhood, there are swimming pools everywhere. And while swimming pool water with the chlorine isn't something that you would want to drink straight, I do know that things with boiling, iodine drops, and a ceramic filter, hypothetically, I could get into that pool water. But is that correct? Dr. Zed, is pool water an option if you filtered it properly?
We have the same question actually from Charlotte. She's asking about pool water because, with the zombie apocalypse going on, lots of abandoned houses, especially in the Phoenix area, for example, and the pools, they're just sitting there full of water. Can you drink that? And if so, how, Dr. Zed?
Great question. So most pool water, I don't own a pool, so I'm not super expert in how you shock a pool and the chemicals you put in play. I do know that people put hydrochloric acid into pool water, and that is the source of the chlorine that helps disinfect it. Chlorine by itself in water is not going to kill you at the concentrations that it's in pool water. And anybody who's, as a kid, swimming in many neighborhood pools, I certainly drank my fair share of pool water and survived. So you can drink a certain amount of it. And if water is the limiting factor for your survival, you probably could survive on pool water, depending on how recently and how much acid has been added to it.
I think it's important to keep this idea of improvisation in mind for all of these apocalyptic situations. Knowing your environment and knowing what's around you. For instance, I know there are a couple golf courses right near me, and they have ponds with fish. So that's another potential water supply that I have close by.
And food, maybe.
And food, yes, definitely. That is something that I actually fly fish. So although I don't carry that equipment, I do carry just a little bit of fishing line and a hook. So I have something. with me. But again, it's all about having options and knowing your environment.
We have 2 questions from the audience right on these points, so I'm going to put them up in quick succession here. First one is from Carlo. He's asking about duct tape, because duct tape, like water, is necessary, but it's also heavy. So how much duct tape should Carlo carry in his go bag? Maybe Emily will have that one for you.
I've said it before, but I think duct tape before guns. I think that having duct tape is such an important resource because you can use it for so many things, including even bandaging a wound if you need to. So I personally carry 2 rolls of duct tape in my go bag. I think I could probably fit another one in there because it's not that heavy, but we have to think that in a zombie apocalypse, things like duct tape, things that are produced in factories, I know I wouldn't be able to make this resource myself. So I think it's important to not only have a couple rolls with me, but if I'm scavenging for supplies, I would definitely take all the duct tape I could find.
Joe, what's Dr. Zed, what are the uses of duct tape medically speaking?
Emily brought up a great one. In the emergency room, we frequently use steri strips, which is basically a cloth-backed, very sticky tape to close wounds. And duct tape can accomplish the very same thing. You just take your duct tape, tear off a little strip, and then make it into smaller strips, and then you can use that to provide traction over a gaping wound. That's an excellent use. And sort of beyond that obvious medical point, duct tape is useful for a variety of different reasons, both medical and non-medical. And the thing is, you can't improvise tape. If you don't have duct tape or tape with you, it's very hard to come up with some kind of alternative. So I totally agree with Emily. This is the roll that I have in my pack. It's relatively small, so you have the advantage of it being light, but I probably don't have enough of it. I do have some other kinds of tape with me as well, though, also.
What other kinds of tape do you have? Now I'm curious.
Well, I have this Coban tape, so this would be more medically related, just for providing a little bit of a pressure dressing that's wouldn't constrict blood flow. So Coban is a medical tape that is useful. I've got a little bit of paper tape. Probably I would leave this one behind if I had a choice. This duct tape is so much better.
Yes, I'm all about duct tape. I think that in addition to its medical benefits, you have to think about the other things we were talking about. So using tape to help secure your shelter or put a blanket over, your structure, having duct tape to repair your shoes. Footwear is something that's really important. I know I keep socks and old sneakers in my go bag at all times on the very bottom. Since, to be honest, most of the time, the shoes I'm wearing, especially if I'm teaching or working, aren't necessarily the most practical for an apocalypse. But again, you might not be able to find shoes as readily. So having duct tape to repair the shoes or the footwear that you do have is really important.
Yeah.
So we have a question here from Dave and one from Elizabeth. Dave wants to see what your go bag looks like. Emily, would you show your go bag?
I would love to. So it's got open a little bit right now. So this is my go bag. It is just a Nixon backpack that I stole from my brother that used to be his in middle school, I'm pretty sure. Some people have argued that I should have more of an outdoor bag, shall we say, than a backpack. But what I really like about just using a regular backpack is I have so many pockets and openings, and I love these ones on the side. So I have it kind of divided personally into like the lighting side and then the protection side. So I just like having something that has a lot of exterior pockets in addition to interior, so I can sort of organize it to the best of my ability. But yes, it's just basically a big backpack.
And Liz is asking. Oh, sorry. Let's let Joe show what's in his, and then we'll kind of come back to this question. Actually, let's come back to this question too, just about what do you need to have in your go bag to survive, and we'll focus on this from a medical perspective. So, Joe, why don't you show your go bag and what you think are the most essential things from a medical perspective, and then we'll pop back over to Emily again.
Right. So I think obviously a go bag can take many different forms. This is just a little commercial kit from Chinook Medical Gear Incorporated. Now, we should say that we have no financial interest, or we're not we're not shilling for any of these companies, but this is just the bag that I happen to have. And it's big enough to contain lots of medical gear. There's lots of stuff in here that I think is not necessary that I wouldn't bring with me. So, for instance, a thermometer, I leave it behind. We'll toss that one on the ground. I've got lots of ACE compression wraps. I think many of these, probably I've got way too many. We'll toss these, and we're gonna leave them behind. Stethoscope. I will tell you, during the current COVID-19 pandemic, I rarely even use my stethoscope anymore. So it certainly is not going to be useful during a zombie apocalypse either. That one's staying behind. I've got a blood pressure cuff. Useful? No. You can just measure someone's pulse and get a sense of blood pressure. And of course, if someone's talking to you, they've got adequate blood pressure to perfuse their brain, which is important during a zombie apocalypse. Here's something that I will bring with me, the SAM splint, and we featured this on previous episodes. This is definitely going to stay in the pack. And let's talk briefly about medication. Most people will say, laypersons that are out there are going to find some sort of commercial first aid kit that has some useful things in it and maybe some things that are less useful. It's important to have some kind of gauze. Now, this is relatively easy to improvise. If you have a clean cotton t-shirt, that will do the trick. But if you don't have that, it might be useful just to carry, this is a cling wrap that is very useful for tying off wounds. You could also use it to improvise a sling. We should talk briefly about medications. I've got several injectable medications in my kit. This is naloxone. This comes in a nasal spray, which is probably better for an apocalypse situation, just avoiding needles in general. But if you came across somebody with an opioid overdose, again, in my line of work, this may come in handy. You'd have to make a decision about what's useful for you. I have, for gut upset, I have some Zofran. Again, this is an injectable. I'd probably have a dissolving pill as opposed to an injectable. And then I have things like Benadryl, comes in pill form, works just as well that way. I've got nitroglycerin. This is probably useless, and I'm going to leave it behind. But as far as things that are going to kill you or somebody in your party when you're trying to escape, you have to think about the things that kill people in ordinary life. And people do die of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. So we would use nitroglycerin if someone's having a heart attack, but we're going to leave this behind because what's going to work even better is to have some aspirin with you. And I guess the last thing I'll say about medications is it's probably important to find a prescription antibiotic. So this is cephalexin. It probably doesn't matter which antibiotic you bring as long as it's a broad spectrum antibiotic. So this would be for sure in my kit. And I think
Dr. Zed, we have a question from Erica about medications. She's saying she has some expired painkillers. Are they still okay to keep in a go bag for emergencies?
I was wondering the exact same thing. In my go bag, I have some now expired pain medication and antibiotics. So is it worthwhile keeping these things?
I think it depends on which medication. What are your ecological circumstances? Do you live in a hot, moist environment or a cool, dry environment? There are some things that are for sure going to be expired. So this nitroglycerin, this is awesome. This expired 01/96. All right. Now this probably actually would be useless even if it was just a few months old because nitroglycerin is unstable. So this is obviously expired and useless. But there are other things like those antibiotics. If the antibiotics were kept in a dry, cool place, like hopefully maybe a cabinet somewhere, that probably is okay. This actually, again, dates to 2016. My guess is these are probably still okay. So you just have to look up. Certain medications are expire at different rates. I will tell you that for most things, this is true for food too, the expiration date is mostly useless. And if it's in the appropriate environment, things can last way longer than the published expiration date.
This kind of comes back to this issue of being ready to improvise if things get really bad, and you shouldn't just throw away food because it expired yesterday if the zombies are at your door and you can't leave, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have another question about medication from Charlotte. She's asking about allergy meds and aspirin, and also how often should she check her go bag to see if there are expired items. So how should she sort of be handling that on a daily or monthly, yearly basis?
I would say maybe every other year. Again, don't take the expiration date too seriously. If you have something that expired in 1996 like this, then yeah, chuck it. But probably if you're going to be assembling a go bag right now, I would just check it in a couple of years. Make sure it has all the things that you need. Most people, myself included, my go bag or my expedition bag is going to vary depending on where I might think about going or the time of year. And so it changes over time. So having a periodic check just to make sure it still contains all the things you want it to is super important.
I would agree with that. I personally check my go bag just twice a year to make sure I still have everything that I need. For me in particular, Benadryl is really important. So you have to know your own medical needs. I have some pretty serious allergies, including one I just found out this week, to mosquitoes, which I had no idea that was even a possibility. So I think it's always good, even if you don't have any known allergies, to have some Benadryl with you. It's pretty readily available and you can get it. One other thing I would recommend, since I am not an MD, I can sometimes forget what actually all my prescriptions do, especially if they are some of the older ones. So I use the internet and technology we have now, and I actually write the purpose of every prescription that I have just very clearly in Sharpie on the outside. So I know, for instance, if I need to be taking something for nausea or heartburn versus a painkiller, right? The worst thing you would want to do would be to give yourself the wrong medication when you're already panicked in an apocalypse situation.
That makes a lot of sense. And we have another question that's related to this from Liz. So she's asking, what should she do now if she has a serious medical condition that you need prescription medicine for? Can you ask your doctor now for a backup? And if the doctor is still human too, I mean, maybe there's an issue if your doctor is already turned into a zombie. Dr. Zed, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, if you have a serious medical condition, make sure you have an adequate supply. This is important, again, almost no matter what the context is. It'd be important to not be reliant on having the Walgreens open for a refill. So just do make sure that you have the things that you absolutely need that are ready to go. And I would ask your doctor now before he or she becomes zombified. That's an excellent point. One other point that I want to make here is that, as you know, we don't have a vaccine that would protect us against all sorts of zombifications, but vaccines are wonderful in that they are long-lasting, that you don't need to carry them with you. Again, we're kind of assuming that most of our listeners are from North America, but we may be talking to some people from developing countries where there are things like typhus, typhoid. Certainly tetanus is a concern no matter where you are. Make sure all your vaccines are up to date against even the things that are going to be important seasonally, like influenza.
Great. That's such a good point. I never thought of that before. The idea of, vaccines, like you said, are great in general. And if you want to frame that in survival, the vaccines you have can help you, be able to survive and not rely on these things. Because you mentioned that we can't rely on the local Walgreens or pharmacy. From a survival standpoint, you also have to keep in mind that those are going to be places other people are going to be trying to get to. We see this right in every zombie horror film where people have taken over drugstores or supermarkets for supplies, for medicine. So it's my opinion that I think sometimes it's better to stay put. So if you can have everything you need or as much as you can be prepared around you. So especially at the beginning of the apocalypse, you're not the one having to fight for supplies and put your life at risk in that capacity.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about Go Bag Challenge. So we have an awesome show that we're going to be launching on Channel Zed called Go Bag Challenge. And Emily Zarka is our awesome host. I'm going to put up our art. And Emily, do you want to say a little bit about Go Bag Challenge?
Yes. So Go Bag Challenge was inspired by myself being crazy prepared. Some would say paranoid. I like to say prepared. And so I want to see what's in your go bag. Think about it as some of those, what would you save in your burning house type projects. So if you have a go bag of any kind, I would love to see it. please take out all the items from the bag and photograph them on a flat surface. And we are going to be in the show judging people's bags and really just looking at not just the practical items, but the comfort items that people put in their go bags, because I think that those are important as well. And then if you win the Go Bag Challenge, we have some really cool, unique illustration, original art prizes. So please submit your go bags for Go Bag Challenge. I'd love to see what's in your go bags. I know I always learn new things that I need to put in mine, so share.
Yeah, so Go Bag Challenge is our super interactive show because all of you get the chance to submit what's in your go bag. And if your go bags are selected, then you will actually be on Go Bag Challenge. And Emily and our other judges will give you some challenges and will be judging you. So if you have a go bag, or even if you just have some random, contents of your backpack that you think might help you survive in the zombie apocalypse, you can submit the contents of your go bag to be a part of Go Bag Challenge. So these are some details about how exactly you go about entering, and we're going to put all of this up on social media so that it is super easy for you to follow these instructions and show us what is in yours.
So Athena, what would be the top 3 things in yours after having this conversation?
So I actually just bought a bunch more duct tape. So I have my go bag, and then I also have my little everyday carry, which if I'm going anywhere, even on a hike, I always have that with me. And so I think probably my top 3 would be duct tape, Benadryl, because I also have a bunch of random allergies, especially to biting insects. And then probably a pack of water, just so that, if I am in a place where I can't get water, which I often am, I can at least survive for a little while.
Right.
Yeah, the top 3 question is a hard one because I'm running through my head. Maybe I'd do top 5. For me, it would definitely be Benadryl as well. And then I would actually advocate for having some kind of knife. I think just for personal protection and especially for maybe being able to get access to water. That would probably be my second one. And now I'm torn between life straw or fire starter. I don't know, Dr. Zed, if you had to choose one or the other, light or water, which one would you go for?
So fire starter is, like I said, you can boil water and purify it. So if you had to choose between those 2 things, I think that would be that'd be the way to go. So yeah, so my top 5, I would definitely have fire starter. I would have a blade. I would have duct tape. Can't forget the life straw, just because that's going to save so much time. You don't have to boil water if you're on the go. Some signaling or communication or navigation device. I would say that your cell phone, even if the cell towers are down, still will work as a GPS device as long as those satellites are functioning, and you can use them for navigation. So having some familiarity with a map and compass or a GPS device, being able to read the USGS topographic maps might be also something to think about. Again, I've kind of gone beyond my 5 things here, but those are my top 5.
That's such a good point about something to signal with. I know that that's something that comes even in a lot of conventional, I know I have one in here and I have an additional one, is something just like an emergency blanket. Not only provides you heat, but you can also use it, because it is a reflective surface, to signal if someone is looking for you. So there's a lot you can do. I think it's, again, all about sort of jerry-rigging or using the things in your pack for multiple purposes. So you need to be thinking, you can't carry that much, so how can each thing you carry be used in different ways?
Yes, so I have a combination small blade plus a whistle that goes with me every time I go backpacking.
Smart. Having something like that. One thing too, and again, we're not advocating for any particular products, but I have this little guy attached to my bag, and it's actually a solar powered light. So you can go hiking or walking around and it can be charging. The battery lasts pretty long, but it has not only a light function, but like a blinking function, again, for signaling if you have someone looking for you. And it weighs practically nothing, so I'm a huge fan of that.
And you could also use it as a signal mirror, which is something with your Girl Scout skills that I'm sure resuscitate that.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, we are at time, but Dr. Zed and Dr. Emily Zarka, thanks so much for sharing your brains with all of us. And a reminder, don't forget to submit your Go Bag contents for Go Bag Challenge. You can do that on Instagram or on Twitter using the hashtags Go Bag Challenge and Channel Zed. And if you are interested in being a part of the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine meeting, registration is open. And you can submit your registration, and we'll be also having opportunities for last-minute abstracts for short talks. The major talk abstract submission is closed, but we will be having some smaller abstract submissions open in a little bit, and you can find information about all of that on zombiemed.org. And don't forget also, at the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine meeting, Dr. Zed will be giving extensive wilderness survival, zombie apocalypse survival advice through several Dr. Zed shows. So if you like what you see on these Q&As with Dr. Zed, you will love what Dr. Zed and his colleagues are putting together for the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine meeting. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you especially Dr. Zed and Dr. Zarka for sharing those amazing brains with all of us today.
Great to learn from you too. All right. Thanks so much.